So one of the primary tasks and challenges of theology and in pastoral teaching and communication is to try and convey as accurate a vision of God as we possibly can. Now, this is impossible, but it is worth our sincere effort and best attention. Now, one of the temptations that is constantly with us is if we develop a theology that overemphasizes the relatability of God, the humanity of God, we can actually develop a faith that is then too casual. If, on the other hand, we develop a theology that overemphasizes the otherness and the transcendence of God, we can develop a faith that is detached and theoretical, and it's not actually a sincere relational experience. So the good work of theology is to try and find a great combination of both the relatability and the transcendence and otherness of God. And we find that consistently in Jesus. In John chapter 8, Jesus makes a statement, and it is a stunning little moment of insight. He's being harassed by the Pharisees, and he comes out with this one-liner, you could say. He looks at them and he says, "Before Abraham was born, I am." Now, that was a very combustible thing for Jesus to say, because he is relating himself to Yahweh, but he's also saying that he is not bound by time the same way that everybody else is, that somehow before the birth of Abraham, Jesus existed. The Logos was real, and therefore the rules that apply to the rest of us in time and in history don't apply to Jesus the same way they apply to us. Now, what's he saying here? He's giving us a glimpse of the part of theology that teaches us that God is non-temporal, which means that God is not subject to time the way we are all subject to time. You see, you and I, we can only be in one place at one time. We have a past, which is a memory. We have the present, which is where we are right here, right now. And we have the future, which is something we can anticipate and look forward to. But we can't be in all three or even two of those places at once. We can only be in the present. God, however, is non-temporal. So there's something different going on. Not only is God occupying eternity, but since time is part of the created order, God is not subject to it. God is not subject to time the way we are, because it's part of creation. So God doesn't so much have a memory that he has to think back on things, but rather the past is still fully present to him. God doesn't have to anticipate the future waiting for it to happen. God fully occupies the future. Why and how do we know that? Well, the philosophical theologians have taken a long time to argue with each other about this, but the basic premise would be, if the doctrine of divine simplicity is true, which I believe it thoroughly is, and runs through all of our theology, then God is immutable. He will not and cannot change. And also God is fully transcendent. He occupies everything that it is possible to occupy, and that includes time. Therefore, all of time exists within God. God doesn't exist within time. All of creation exists within God. God doesn't exist within creation. And since time is a part of creation, both all material matter and all of history are consolidated together within God. He holds all things together by the power of his word. Now the challenge is we don't even have the vocabulary or the concepts or the imagination to begin to fathom how something or someone can be non-temporal. How can something exist outside of the past and the present and the future? We just don't even understand how that is possible. But that's the beauty of the mystery of the transcendence of God that makes this another confirmation of the grandeur and the excellence of God, because he is eternally above and beyond us, and yet has become one of us. And the beauty and the mystery of the incarnation is that God in Christ subjected himself to time, to have a past and a present and a future. Jesus could only be at one place at one time. You could say his non-temporal status was temporarily subdued. That's the mystery of the incarnation. How can God cease to somehow exhibit one of his capacities or attributes without changing or failing to be fully God, and yet in Christ We have Jesus who in his humanity was fully God, and yet for that time on earth was non-temporal. So the water here is pretty deep, and I think we quickly get confounded, but I think the key is to remember that in Christ we have the consolidation of eternity and temporality. We have omnipresence and locality. We have otherness and humanity. We have God who is fully transcendent and yet is absolutely human and relatable to us. So again, Christ is the fullness of God in bodily form. And how that applies to his timelessness, we can't quite grasp or fathom, but it's good for us to at least appreciate and ponder and acknowledge that this is another wonder that the gospel holds for us. Okay, ponder these things. Until next time, peace.